My name is Jim Less. I go by Clue. You can think about that one. And I flew for the Air Force for 21 years. Flew F-111s, F-117s, T-38, F-16, and a brief stint in a Global Express business jet.
Nils Larson, went to the Air Force Academy and then became a first assignment instructor pilot. And then ended up becoming a U-2 pilot, went to test pilot school, came out of there, ended up flying F-15s, much other stuff in flight tests, some stuff nobody's ever heard of. Ended up doing, taught at Navy test pilot school, came back, did some more U-2 flight test work, and then eventually moved down the street here to NASA about 17 years ago to be a NASA test pilot.
Thank you for joining me today on the Pilot podcast. We have Clue and Nils today. They are test pilots for NASA and they do some amazing stuff. So they are here to talk about what they do and a cool project they got going on. So thank you guys for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, anytime. So I know we kind of did a little pre-recording, we will say, but I'm really interested to see how you became a test pilot, because you hear about it, you hear about the people flying all the cool stuff, doing all this crazy stuff. You see it on Top Gun, right? Where he's going Mach 10, the plane explodes, they jump out. That's kind of what people might be thinking about test pilot now. So share a little bit about how you become a test pilot and then maybe a couple stories or two if you have any.
Okay. To become a test pilot, to do the kind of things we're doing, you need to go to a test pilot school, which generally means the U.S. Air Force Test Pilot School or the Navy Test Pilot School. There's also a civilian test pilot school in Mojave, just up the road from us here, called National Test Pilot School. But that you've got to get somebody to pay the tuition for you.
A couple of foreign ones as well.
There's some foreign schools, and there are, through the military, there are exchange programs with those. But generally, you're going the military route, though there are a lot of civilian test pilots who have mostly done on-the-job training and worked their way up within various companies like Cessna or Beech. The background, you generally need an engineering degree.
Science, math.
Might work, but generally we're engineers first.
A lot of experience. You're not going right out of college. You got to get some experience. I think in the Air Force, I think it was 1,000 hours minimum in order to fly.
It helped if you'd flown more than just one type of aircraft.
Yep.
Makes sense. I got a couple hours in 172. I'm going to apply, see how that works.
You need a little more experience there.
Yeah, I bet. Was the process something that you kind of always thought you wanted to do? Is this kind of like a goal you had since you started flying, or was it just kind of, this sounds cool, see if I can be a test pilot?
But I actually joined the Air Force to be a test pilot. I mean, cool. As a 16-year-old, I had a instructor handed me, a book. The book was The Right Stuff. Told me to read it. I read it and said, "Ooh, I know what I want to be when I grow up." And had to, map out how I was going to get there. And so that's how I ended up going to the Air Force Academy, and always knew that I was going to apply to test pilot school someday. So, I kind of already had that roadmap out. So it's, if you think about it, it's like when I was 16, I think I decided I wanted to do that. And by the time I think I got selected, I was 30 years old, when I, got picked to go. And, by the time I graduated, I was 31. So
talk about delayed gratification.
I had a lot of fun getting there. So,
yeah.
Probably about the same age. I also read The Right Stuff and said, wow, that looks pretty cool. But I had no idea how somebody got into those positions. I figured that was for somebody else to do. And I started looking into being an engineer. And then when I got involved with Air Force ROTC, I realized, hey, I could be a pilot. That might be more fun than just designing the airplanes. And then along the way in my Air Force career, I met guys who wanted to be test pilots as well. And I started realizing that was something that I could do. That was not something for other people. I was actually on my way towards meeting the qualifications to be a test pilot.
Yeah. And when you're looking for someone, Nils, you said you hired Clue. So when you're looking for someone to interview, or even in an interview process, I'm guessing there are hundreds, if not hundreds of people that want to do this and apply. So you have some pretty impressive people how can you stand out in that process? How can you kind of separate yourself? I know what the airlines always say when you're in an interview, they want to see if they can go on a 4-day trip with you and make sure they're not going to want to kill you at the end of the day. Is that somewhat similar with you guys too?
Yeah, I mean, somewhat. I mean, it's not a huge community when it comes to test pilots. So you kind of know people, you know, their reputations. But probably the biggest thing is, your experience, so we, almost everybody that we've hired in here lately has all been retired military when it came to our test pilots. And much of that is just because, when I see somebody who's, doesn't have much experience, and they're a test pilot versus I see Clue, who's got how many different airplanes and how many programs did you fly? It just becomes a lot easier to go, well, he's going to be, higher on the food chain to go interview. And for us, you had to actually come out and interview, and we, not just do a face-to-face, but we go fly with you to make sure that, yep, you're what we want. So, but that's
on that flight, you start pulling circuit breakers and see how they do the stuff.
Nothing too bad. A lot of what we do, because we do weird maneuvers with the airplanes sometimes to go get the data we need. So, he can probably tell you about that. The first time that, I made him go out and fly the F-18 that he probably never flew.
No, I hadn't flown an F-18 like that before. And then, then there were some maneuvers that for current test programs that were going on at the time. And he said, here, this is what you're going to do. And we went up to 50,000 feet, got as slow as possible and dove it straight at the ground and recovered at a certain airspeed.
Now, when you're a test pilot, is there an idea, like you think what's going to happen? Is it 50-50 that's what actually happens? Like, do you get surprised more often than you think? Or is it what you think is going to happen? Does that normally actually happen?
I'd say most of the time your predictions are pretty good. But there are times when things just aren't going the way you planned. That definitely are sometimes that happens. But but most of the time, it goes the way. And the times that it doesn't, a lot of times it's more of a airplane malfunction that I've run into anyway, that, you could have in your Cessna 172. So,
As far as a new design goes, modern computing technology allows us to have pretty accurate predictions how the plane's going to fly. We should not see any big surprises, but there's always going to be little areas. The model is going to be good in some spots. It's going to be spot on in some spots, but then in other spots, it's going to be a little bit different than what we expected. And that's what we're going out to look for as test pilots.
Yeah. And then the last thing I'll ask, based on just being a test pilot, how much of the stuff that you've worked on has either been a completed project versus like they just scrap and like, all right, never mind, put that away, file it away, it's gone?
I would say most of what I worked on was fielded. As an Air Force test pilot, I was testing F-16s, and you might ask, well, that's not a new airplane. But the military is continually upgrading. They're upgrading the engines, they're upgrading the flight controls, they're upgrading mostly the software in the aircraft, they're upgrading the radar, they're adding new weapons. So most of the testing that I did was adding new capabilities, and most of that was fielded. It is interesting to see something that when I was flying it barely worked half the time, and now it's a regular part of the aircraft, and current pilots wouldn't think about going and flying without it.
Yeah, I've actually had 2 airplanes that didn't pass.
Oh, really?
So 2 different programs that I was on that we, basically, it didn't go any further. But other ones are really rewarding. I mean, some of the stuff I did at NASA here was some of the earlier, probably more of the mid auto ground collision avoidance testing that we did. And that was really cool because we did the last research phase. Then it went over to the Air Force for development, and now that system has been out there on the F-16 and has saved, I think we're up to 12 lives and 11 airplanes. And it was some high-risk testing. It was the one where my wife said, I don't want to know what you're doing today. And said, and you have my permission to lie to me when I ask you what you're going out to do. So it wasn't it wasn't the safest stuff to go do. But when you got that first email that it saved the first life, and I showed that to her, I had, hair on the back of my neck and chills, and she did too. She goes, must make you feel pretty good. I said, yeah, that this guy is going home to his family, And if it wouldn't have been the research we did, he wouldn't have gone home.
Doesn't get much more rewarding than that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Knowing that the work that you're doing is actually going in to save lives, and it's got to feel pretty good.
Yeah, and he did some of the early auto air collision avoidance work.
Yeah.
So
there's a program that hasn't yet been fielded. We hope that someday that will be.
But it keeps progressing.
But it's getting better as it goes.
Did you guys see I think it was Turkey. Was it the F-18 or F-16? I can't think it was F-18 flying like 5 feet above the water. The viral video that's going out right now.
Oh, I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah. It looks like it should be a test pilot doing that, but he's screaming as low as he can go. Maybe watch it after this.
All right.
So we are here to talk about a cool project you guys are doing. Do you guys want to explain a little bit?
Sure.
Well, the X-59 is the airplane. It's part of a program called Quesst. But we like to talk about the airplane because that's the fun part.
Yeah.
It is an X-plane. It's designed to show that you can fly supersonic and have a quiet sonic boom, or what we like to call a sonic thump. We have props here with us real quick. I can show you if it fits in the screen, a model. But the real airplane is supposed to be rolling out tomorrow in Palmdale.
Mm-hmm.
No way.
So it's kind of, coming out tomorrow. It's basically, you always see, the program managers and people, talking and kind of showing the public, the airplane that, we're going to get to go fly eventually sometime, hopefully this year. It's still, it's right in between its production and the ground test. So there's a little bit of ground test that's been done, and there will probably be a little bit more production that has to happen. But generally speaking, we're now really into the phase where you're going to see a lot of the ground tests going on, and eventually leading up into the flight tests. So it's an exciting milestone to get to. Clue got to 2 weeks ago, got to sit in the airplane, I think, for the first time, and that's touch the airplane. Most of the time we weren't allowed to touch it, because we weren't building it. We're supposed to fly it. They're going to let us touch it eventually, but
Right.
So 2 weeks ago we got to actually touch it, so that was pretty special. But that rollout tomorrow, other people can join too. So you can find it on the NASA streaming service, which is NASA Plus, or you can find it on YouTube, I think, on our channel there. And if you got NASA TV, with whatever provider you're using, that would be another area. Or if you can't find it, Google NASA, X-59 rollout. You'll probably find it somewhere out there.
Something will be there.
Yeah, it's a big ceremony. The airplane is finally all put together, painted up in nice NASA colors, and not quite ready to fly, but ready to roll out and
soon
introduced to the public. And then, as Nils said, the next step is a lot of ground checks to make sure that all the systems are working together correctly, and ultimate leading towards first flight.
So when we're talking about reducing kind of like the sonic boom, right? When everyone thinks about that loud noise, you cover your head, windows breaking everywhere. When we talk about reducing that, is that going to be for future technology to use in airliners or corporate jets, or is this going to be specifically kind of on the NASA, the military side?
Well, no, I mean, we're doing this for everybody else. Like right now, we don't get to go supersonic. We do, but you don't. But we'd like everybody to go supersonic, so you can get everywhere twice as fast, or maybe even a little bit more than twice as fast. So, the technologies we are developing here, and this is not a prototype, it's an X-plane. So the technologies we're developing, hopefully you would see the DNA essentially from this eventually be on that supersonic airliner or supersonic business jet, that other contractors out there would develop. So, for us, it's cool to go out there and do this research, but it's really, the contractors that are going to, take this technology and then go build those, airliners or biz jets or whatever.
Yeah, a lot of people probably don't realize that most of the technologies in a modern airliner that make it quieter, safer, more fuel efficient, those technologies were developed by NASA. And NASA shares whatever we come up with. We're not doing this for ourselves. We're trying to push the technology.
What can you say that we've learned from obviously the Concorde, military jets that can go supersonic. What have they learned up until now? Because there hasn't been a mass-produced airplane for civilians since the Concorde, right? That was what, the 1960s, and you would think 50 years, 60 years has gone by. You think we'd either be going faster or we'd be continuously doing it, right? So what have we learned from where you guys are today about kind of flying supersonic and just what it's going to look like either in 5, 10, 15 years?
I'll change your question a little bit. The reason that we haven't seen supersonic travel become widespread really is the ban on supersonic flight. 50 years ago, 1973, the FAA banned supersonic flight over land for everybody but the military and the government. And most other countries around the world have done the same thing. So that's put a big restriction on supersonic aircraft. Not too many people want to buy an aircraft that they can only fly over the water. So we are trying to change that with the X-59.
Yeah. So instead, if we can make the boom into a thump, so when you look at the different phases for this airplane, the first phase is making sure that all the models and technology, that it actually produces what we think it will produce, that thump. Then what we're really going to do, and this is unique for an X-plane, is we're going to take it to a community near you, because we need the public to tell us what is acceptable. Who cares what I think? We need people on the ground, people that live in, cities to tell us, that's fine. If that's good, go make it that. So we take that data, we get it to the regulators, and then it's their job to hopefully, change that speed limit to a sound limit instead, and then let us, let people go build these things and go supersonic over land.
Yeah, and if you need a city to test it at, I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, so feel free. There's not a ton of people here. There's some military space kind of close by, so just let me know. I'll coordinate it.
All right. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Cool. I'll stand out there with my microphone.
It's going to be a lot of fun. We're actually going to have cell phone apps out there for anybody that wants to volunteer, and then we'll be looking for their feedback.
So I'm guessing you guys have flown supersonic more than once, right? So you're probably used to it
yesterday,
by now.
3 times.
Yeah, yesterday. Cool.
3 times.
Go ahead and brag. My citation latitude does not go that fast, so I appreciate that. But what's it like inside the cockpit? Like, we all on the ground kind of get an idea of what it's like outside the cockpit. What it's like inside the cockpit?
It is a lot different. We don't know we're supersonic if our gauges don't tell us.
Yeah.
I had been flying in the Air Force, flying supersonic for years, and had never actually heard a sonic boom myself. And I was very startled the first time I heard it. I was living in New Mexico at Holloman Air Force Base. In my base house, I thought somebody had thrown something at the side of the house. I did not know what I was listening to. It was loud and startling, and it's disruptive. It'll wake your child is sleeping right now. It would wake them up.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah. Well, and most people don't realize they've heard a sonic boom, because thunder is a sonic boom. So, it's a little different than an airplane, because thunder, you just get a bang, where when you have an airplane, it's a boom, boom, because you have the front and the tail shock. So you have that sounds a little bit different, but it's still very startling.
And
I grew up in North Carolina.
A lot of people don't realize is that the sonic boom is not just produced at the moment that you go supersonic. Anytime an airplane's traveling supersonic, it's taking that shock wave with it and laying down a sonic boom plus or minus probably 20 to 30 miles either side of the flight path.
Yeah.
So a supersonic jet traveling across the country will overfly a lot of people. And if it's loud and disruptive, it's not going to be acceptable.
Yeah. So that's why we're trying to make a thump. So instead of a boom, and we think it's going to sound a little bit like somebody slamming a car door, or maybe, rolling thunder.
So how do you do that? Like, what is, obviously you're not just hoping it's going to do it. You have an idea of what is going to happen or how you're going to make that happen. So what's the so-called secret behind it?
Here it is. The secret is really in the shape of the aircraft, and the short answer is long and skinny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The X-59 is 100 feet long, 99.7. It has one seat in it. It's designed just for the test pilot. Wingspan is only 30 feet. And the nose is actually 38 feet of this aircraft, over 1/3 of the aircraft.
Dang.
So yeah, the way it kind of works is every time you have a change, in the airplane, where a canard comes off or the wing comes off or any change, you end up getting a shock wave. So, in this airplane, when you look at it, that big long nose, part of the idea is to keep those shock waves separated, because when they are close together, they kind of tend to come together and then reinforce each other, so that it remains strong. So if you can keep them parallel and separated instead of getting that reinforced, loud boom, hopefully you get something that's a little bit more subdued.
Are there any other kind of, I have a question here that says, well, what are the two goals of the Quesst mission? Obviously, the first goal is to go from a boom to a thump. What's the other goal?
Well, that's that thing we were talking about when it comes to figuring out how loud is too loud. So there's one is, validate that you can actually do this, and produce something that's reproducible, and then the other one is, go out there and actually get the data to potentially change the actual regulation.
Yeah. Are we expecting, so obviously this plane is designed to do a thump instead of a boom.
Right.
Are we expecting the very first flight, you're pushing throttles, you're going for it to be quieter, or are we kind of like, we don't know how much quieter?
If you're talking about the sonic boom on the first flight, we're not going to even put the gear up.
Baby steps.
Sorry.
But the first supersonic.
Sonic flight, we expect to find out what it sounds like.
Yeah. It's not like there's a special switch or a cloaking device we can turn on or something like that. It should, because of the design of the airplane, we would hope that you won't hear that boom. Might be the chase's boom next to you, because it's not designed to be, quiet. Yeah. So, but we're really hoping that you'll hear that thump instead of a boom.
There are some small things we can do without major modifications to the airplane that will change the sonic boom. This is a fairly precise science. We can move the fuel around to change the CG, which then changes the trim surfaces, changes the center of pressure of the aircraft a little bit to change that boom. But there's not a lot that we can do. So the first boom should be close to what we're going to get.
And they have shaped. Cool. There's a sonic boom demonstrator that was out there that's, I don't know, at least 20 or more, 20 years or something old, where they modified an F5 so that they know that, and this was mostly modified in the nose, and they actually, have gone out and flown this airplane and said, look, okay, that did what we thought it would do. So some of this technology is somewhat proven, but it's not one where we've put it all together before.
Got it. Cool. And then when you yourselves, when I think of myself, let's say I upgrade to an airplane, this airplane's been flying usually for a long time. How do you prepare to fly a plane that's kind of never flown before? Did they build a simulator with this as well? Like, are you in a simulator? Okay. So you're in a simulator right now, kind of going through everything, going through emergencies, flows, and all that kind of stuff to prepare you for that. Okay. That was going to be my question. How do you prepare for a plane that's never flown before? So
practice.
Yeah. I think we're not, I've already got like 300 hours in the simulator already.
We're probably going to have more time in the simulator than we'll ever get in the real airplane.
Who gives you an oral or a check ride for a plane that's never flown before? Someone else ahead of you that has one?
He'll test me.
Yeah. So, and the first time you go, it basically the chief pilot looks at all the training you've done and all the simulation you've done and everything, and basically says, you're qualified, and you go.
Yeah.
And then usually once that person gets back, then they're the IP for the other person.
You find out whether the training was correct or not.
Yeah.
And then when you're going into the plane for the first time, what's usually your feelings? Are you more excited? Are you a little bit, first plane, you don't really know how it's going to react? Are you a little nervous, or kind of a mix of both?
I will say we've never flown an X-plane, a supersonic manned X-plane before, so not really sure what it's going to be like.
Yeah, but even just some of the ground testing we've got to do, it was really cool getting to strap into the thing. You've been in the air, in the sim all the time, but it was really cool to finally, sit in the actual airplane, strap into it, have the displays up and running, and and it starts to really feel real. You get excited from that. It's kind of weird. I think my younger son, who's 16, or I guess he's 15, but he always refers to it as nerve sighted. He goes, I'm both nervous and excited. So
I like that. I'm gonna steal that.
So I don't know if I'll be excited or nerve sighted. So
you'll have to report back.
Thoughts about the pilot's prayer. Dear Lord, don't let me screw up.
Yeah.
And going on to X-planes, are X-planes kind of the final be all for solving a problem usually?
Sometimes. I mean, if you look at the way they've been used, throughout, ever since the first X-plane was the X-1 that broke the sound barrier. So usually they're out there to, develop new ideas, new technologies where you actually have to have a new physical thing and not just put it in the wind tunnel or something like that. So, when it comes to the technology, maturation, they are pretty close to the end of the line, and then soon after, that's when you'll see them start to flow into, real, actual production. I don't know. What do you think?
And Nils talked about the shaped boom demonstrator of 20 years ago. That showed that we could affect the front shock.
Right.
But that was not a complete solution. This is the only way to show a quiet supersonic airplane is to go and build one. All the predictions in the world aren't going to get any aircraft manufacturer to take the chance of building something that they're hoping is going to be quiet enough to be feasible. So we have to go do this, and the X-plane is the only way.
Yeah, and it's a perfect mission for NASA. I mean, as Clue had talked about before, all the stuff we do, that goes off to, contractors and other people to go use that technology and use the stuff that we've developed. So, the taxpayers pay our salary to go out there and develop these new technologies and then let other people go take that. And they're the ones that make the money. We don't make any money off it.
Well, I mean, the timing seems right too, because there's more private money coming after supersonic flight, right? With the biggest company I think of is Boom in Greensboro, North Carolina. So they're really hoping that they can make it work, and I'm sure they're going to be watching you guys closely to see how this works out. So it's really exciting. I mean, the technology is there to go supersonic, right? We talked about it with the Concorde, and the military's been doing it forever. And from what I know, the Global 7500 that just came out, they actually had to break the sound barrier in that so they could get their certified at Mach 9.6 or 9.5 or whatever it is. So the planes can do it. It's just we got to get this rolling. Right. So it's really cool what you guys are doing. I got a couple. Let's see. I got a couple quiz questions for you. If you've heard these a million times, you got to pretend like you haven't. All right. So I got, let's see, we got a couple of them, but I'm going to go randomly. I'm going to go out of order just in case you memorize them.
You can always throw in some of your own there. See if you can trip us up.
All right. Let's see what we can do.
I'll make him into that. So,
you guys ready?
Yeah.
All right. Let's do it. How many people can fly in the X-59? We'll start easy.
One.
Just one of us. Yeah.
At a time.
Yeah.
So when you guys are doing that, I'm guessing both will be there on the ground, kind of listening in. Are you guys always required to be there for each mission, or is like one person's off, one person's on?
We have a chase pilot usually. There's right now there's 3 pilots. There's a Lockheed pilot and then the 2 of us. So frequently, you'll need a chase pilot, and it doesn't have to be an X-59 pilot necessarily to fly the chase, but we probably will be, especially in the beginning. And then one might be in the control room. Just because you have the experience in case they run into issues, you have some advice to give.
Yeah. Well, the X-59's engine is from what type of aircraft?
The
F-18 Super Hornet.
Yep. EF&G. Yep.
There you go. What feature does the X-59 not have? There's multiple choice here. It says, I didn't write these, so don't come at me. A landing gear, B, a front window or windshield, C, a seat, or D, an empennage.
Well, you get this one, Nils.
Yeah. We don't have a front windscreen. So this is something that's relatively unique to the airplane in that because that big, long nose, there is no front windscreen. So our front windscreen is virtual. So it's a camera on the top, and then there's one that we can deploy, when we come into land or take off that comes out the bottom, and they can stitch it together. And we have a display in front of us that is just dedicated to the visual system, and it was developed by some people at NASA and out there at NASA Langley, and we've done some research flights with it, and that was pretty good.
We mounted it on a King Air, went out and flew that. We had one pilot sitting up front looking for traffic, and another sitting in the back using the display. And it turns out with the camera system, we were actually able to see the traffic earlier than with the naked eye.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So and this technology is one of the technologies that may leak over into other aircraft, or even spacecraft, because the astronaut office talked to us about this technology, and they've been talking to the guys at Langley there, and it turns out that they might want to put this in some of their human landing systems up there, on the moon,
for landing on the moon or Mars.
Yeah.
Where you might,
when you think about
the spacecraft, you can't really see where you're landing because it's directly below you. So a camera system would meet that need.
Yeah.
And
even on a smaller scale of the King Air, like you talked about, just being able to notice traffic, flying in South Florida or the Northeast, you're getting a TARA or an RA like every other day. So having AI mixed in there, and it can maybe even highlight the plane for you.
That's what it does.
We should see boxes put around any kind of TCAS or ADS-B traffic that our system's detecting. We'll get a box so we know where to look on the screen and try to pick the aircraft up.
That's cool. And then what kind of screens are we talking? Are we talking about like a Samsung 4K TV up there? Or is it like
ultra high def?
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Just go to Best Buy, pick one up, put it on the plane.
It's got, the problem is you got to have like the, I don't know what you call it. It's not necessarily military grade, but it's got to be flight worthy. So, so there's the environment that you're taking, up in an airplane is a little bit different than your living room. So,
yeah, I don't think my Samsung is going to do well at 51,000 feet.
Right.
So
yeah, exactly.
That makes sense. All right, let's see what else we got. What will be the cruising speed of the X-59?
Mach 1.4.
Yep, that's what we're shooting for. Yeah.
Is there a red line for it?
We think it'll do 1.5. Okay. I think red line's actually a little bit more than that, but I don't think we have anything to do more than about 1.5. So
we might take it to 1.55 just to show that there's a little margin.
Right.
But that's one of the things, as we start flying it, the engineers will refine their predictions and come up with a good red line that they don't think we should exceed.
Yeah. And then who's going to take the first flight?
Oh, yeah, that's Dan Kanan, who's the Lockheed guy.
The guy who's not here.
Yeah, the guy who's not here. So, but yeah, he's been working on this. Well, not necessarily quite as long, but about as long. He and I helped write some of the specifications for the airplane, and then Dog is the Lockheed pilots. But he's developed a lot of the displays, a lot of the, he's, we're all intimately involved with the airplane, but he's a lot more directly involved with a lot of the design, where he, is the one that makes logic choices. He checks with Clue and I, and we all kind of come together. But because he's the one that's actually part of the contractor that's building the airplane, he is much more, sleeves rolled up and truly the expert in the airplane.
Now, when we're coming into land, from what I remember from the Concorde, you could change the nose pitch a lot. Similar with this, or is it a fixed nose pitch since you don't have to worry about you seeing outside the windshield, or is it very similar?
Good question. You figured it out right there in your question. Is we're using the camera, but there's no droop to the nose. Okay. It's just that lower camera is picking it up, and hopefully it's still running. So it's actually 3 cameras.
The camera system is a lot simpler solution than trying to bend and droop that huge nose down.
Yeah.
So.
Is there a fail-safe to the camera? You mentioned that you have 3 camera systems, but on the unlucky day you're down to number 3. Are you kind of sweating bullets of got to land it somehow?
We land F-15s and F-18s from the back seat where you can't really see around. Tail draggers, a lot of tail draggers, you can't see the runway when you're touching down. So we just need to get down close enough so we can see a little bit of runway out each side. We do have windows. Well, we have a whole canopy that we can look up and we can look either way. And so we just have to get close and we'll land it just fine.
Yeah. Lindbergh did it, but he can hang his head out the side. We can't really do that.
Right.
And we were talking about the simulation training. So we'll be up there and the engineers will fail different stuff on us, and we'll come in and, land it based on all the other tools that we have available to us. So GPS is great.
GPS is amazing. Like, gotta love GPS. Last thing I'll ask you guys is, what are you most excited about this mission?
Ooh, that's a good one. No, nobody's asked me that.
I mean, getting to fly an X-plane, of course, is exciting. As a test pilot, that is a rare opportunity. Yeah. But I think what I'm looking forward to is going out and flying it over a community for the first time and seeing what the result is.
Yeah, I think this has been exciting for us, but the really cool thing is to see how excited the general public is about this idea. When we've gone out and talked to people and they're ready, they're like, hurry up with that thing, will you? So it's, that to me has been one of the things. I mean, we're both geeky science kind of people from the beginning, and blazing new trails and that kind of stuff. I'm just really looking forward to what we're going to learn from this, and ultimately, seeing this eventually lead to supersonic flight over land. That to me will be very cool to see.
Yeah, and I said last question, but these are the easier questions. But where can we find more information out? Website. Obviously, we talked about tomorrow is a big day for you guys. NASA Plus. You mentioned a bunch of other ways that we can go ahead and watch it. But if there's a dedicated site for this, can you tell me what that is?
There is. It is nasa.gov/Quesst. QUESST.
Yeah, SS like supersonic. So yeah.
And there's a lot of information on there, a lot of artist conceptions of the airplane flying that we're soon going to be replacing with real pictures of the airplane flying. There's even 3D models that if you have a 3D printer, you can download the model and print yourself a little mini X-59.
Yep. You can.
I was going to ask, how do I get the X-59 model that you guys had in your hand? Can I go buy one of those?
You can. They're not cheap. So, but yeah.
One day. Yeah. I'll just buy a printer and then I'll print it out. Probably the easier way. All right. Well, that's all I got for you guys. I appreciate your time. Clue, Nils, this has been a lot of fun. I look forward to seeing tomorrow, checking in, and then kind of following along with this. It'd be really cool to have you on again. We can share what you learn or what you're allowed to share, I should say. But we can do some cool podcasts out of it. So thank you so much for coming on, and really excited about this. Like you said, the public's ready for something like this, and it seems like people are ready to spend the money that want to build the airplane. So it's all coming together at the right time. So thank you guys so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having us.